back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for all right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football.
Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, February 11th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining. Between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers, we appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we are going to start off the show. We are going to talk about Aaron Rodgers, and it looks like he will definitely not be coming back to the Jets. He met with the Jets, and the Jets told him that they are planning on moving on, according to Fox's Jay Glazer. We were told that on the Super Bowl, so we'll talk about that. I'll give you my thoughts. We'll also get into talking about, and as you saw me talk about the tips, you saw the Patrick Mahomes graphic, so we'll talk about in the second part of the show how the Super Bowl the other night affects his legacy going forward. We'll get into talking about the Steelers and Russell Wilson, their parting ways, it seems. Jake Glazer also brought that up during Media Week. And then we'll talk about Kellen Moore likely taking the Saints job. And then in the final part of the show, we'll get into talking about Deebo Samuel. He requested a trade, and we'll talk about that as well. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Aaron Rodgers. So if you recall, Aaron Glenn brought up Aaron Rodgers at his introductory press conference and said that Aaron Rodgers will be talked about. They said they were in communication with Aaron Rodgers, and they did meet with him. Aaron Rodgers flew out from his home in California to meet with the Jets, and it seems like, according to reports, that the most likely scenario here is that they're going to move away from Aaron Rodgers, and he's going to be playing elsewhere next year if he decides to play. Now, I have some mixed emotions with it. On one hand, it could be looked at as a mistake because if the Jets want to win now, I think Aaron Rodgers is their best option. I don't think that the quarterbacks that are available out there, at least free agents, because also Matthew Stafford could be traded, and I don't think the Jets are going to do that. I think when you look at the quarterbacks that are free agents, I think he is the best option. I think he showed you towards the end of the year that he could still play, and he would be another year removed from the Achilles injury. Now, obviously, he's in his 40s now, and he could get hurt again. But I do think Aaron Rodgers showed you enough towards the end of the year. And had the Jets, maybe had better coaching, and the coaching situation wasn't a mess, maybe this team would have been a little bit better record-wise instead of 5-12. Now, I'm not saying that, Aaron Rodgers is excused from his level of play last year now, because he wasn't great at times. I get it. But I do think that he did show you something. Now, you could fall into the trap of, oh, wow, he looked great towards the end of the year. Let's bring him back. And then he ends up not playing well again. But who knows? I don't know what the Jets' plan is at quarterback now, because now Tyrod Taylor is your option. And you have Jordan Travis on the roster too, but he didn't practice at all. So, I mean, if the Jets are going into the season, now if they go out and they sign Justin Fields, okay. But if they just go into the season next year with Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback, I mean, why couldn't you just bring back Rodgers then? But from some of the things I was listening to yesterday, if the Jets brought Rodgers in to meet with him and say, listen, we think it's best if we part ways, and they just felt like, look, Aaron Rodgers comes with a lot. We've seen that since he's come over to the Jets, and even, towards the end of his Packers career with some of the things that went on. If they just felt like we want a fresh start and we think it's best if we part ways, okay. But, if you're just moving off of him just to move off of him, and you're just going with Tyrod Taylor next year, I mean, I just don't agree with that. If you don't want Aaron Rodgers back because you just feel like the relationship wouldn't mesh, that's one thing. But if you're just not bringing him back because you just don't want to bring him back, and Tyrod Taylor's going to be your starter. I mean, it's not a guarantee that Tyrod's going to be the starter. But if you're just moving off of him just to move off of him, and you have no valid reason for it, then what are we doing? But hopefully we get some clarity on that as to why they said we're good. Now, does Aaron Rodgers want to continue playing? Well, the fact that he flew out to meet with the Jets does show you to an extent that, yeah, maybe he still wants to play. Because if he was not really that into the idea of playing next year, then maybe he doesn't fly out. But he did. So, where could he play next year if he does want to play? Now, we had this discussion yesterday in our production meeting. The Steelers came up, the Raiders, the Titans, even the 49ers have come up. I also would throw the Giants in as well. I feel like for me, and we'll talk about Russell Wilson later in the show, I think of the teams that are looking for a quarterback, I would say the Steelers. I would say the Steelers. Because there's a relationship with when talking about Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers. And it doesn't seem like the Steelers aren't bringing back Russ. I mean, could they bring back Justin Fields? We'll see. But the Steelers, maybe they continue down that path of, all right, we got to bring in a veteran guy because we have a team that can compete. Now, you go from Russell Wilson, who's in his mid-30s, to now Aaron Rodgers, who's in his 40s. So from that perspective, it's like, does that really make sense? In some cases, no. But maybe the Steelers want to take a chance. The Titans also make sense just because I feel like with the veteran players that they have on offense, Calvin Ridley they brought in, and they signed Tyler Boyd in the offseason. They signed Tony Pollard. They did not get great quarterback play in 2024 with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. They are picking in the top 3. So could they take a Shedeur Sanders, a Cam Ward? I mean, you hear that, they might not pass up on a generational talent. So could they take Travis Hunter? And the other thing, too, is it doesn't seem like Devontae Adams is going to come back either now. So is Devontae Adams going to follow Aaron Rodgers to his next destination if he does continue playing? So there's a lot that's going into this. And we're still waiting. I'm sure we're going to get confirmation on what Rodgers decides to do. And if there's one thing we know about him, is that he has always had a chip on his shoulder. And going 5-12 and going out like that, I don't think sits well with him. Now, I always said I think he's going to retire. Now I'm not so sure. I mean, the last time that it was up in the air whether he was going to retire or not, I said he was going to retire, but he did not. So I just don't know. But like I just said, always has a chip on his shoulder. And I don't think he wants to go out like that. And maybe, he waits for an injury to happen. And he gets brought in. Who knows? But I think he could still play. He showed that. It's got to be the right situation. It's got to be a team that's got a line that can protect him. They have weapons. Have at least a decent running game, right? I mean, you look across the board. I mean, the Steelers, I think, would make the most sense. The problem is the line was not great. But they have a lot of young players on that offensive line that need to continue to develop. You got George Pickens there. You got Pat Freiermuth there. I don't know what they're going to do with Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. But listen, if that line can improve and you bring over Devontae Adams and you got him to pair with George Pickens and a good defense, that could work. It's just you're playing in the same division now as Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. The Raiders, I mean, the AFC West is a gauntlet. The Raiders got some ways to go before they can be competitive in that division. The Titans, I mean, if you want to go to the weakest division, Titans could be the option because you got the Texans, the Jaguars, they got a new head coach. The Colts were disappointing. It's possible. I did throw in the Giants, but, we got the Super Bowl champs there. You got the Commanders who made the championship game, and the Cowboys were disappointing last year, but you figure they're going to be better. Maybe you go to the Vikings. You go back to a familiar division. You let J.J. McCarthy sit another year, and you complete the Brett Favre cycle. Maybe you do that. It would be hilarious if that happens. But I don't think so. But that's kind of my thoughts on the whole Aaron Rodgers situation. Let me know what you guys think, though. Where does he end up if he continues to play? Do you think the Jets made a mistake by letting him go? I know there's definitely Jet fans that are happy about this. There are Jet fans that are indifferent about this, and there are Jet fans that are upset about this. I'm kind of in the middle of I get it, but I also think, well, let's see what they end up doing at the quarterback position. But I know there are Jet fans that are upset because it's like you're letting Rodgers go, and now you're really just throwing away another season. And, there's talk of, there was talk of Garrett Wilson wanting out and just, let's just see how this all plays out, and then we'll come back to it. So we're going to take our first break of the show now, and then when we come back, we'll talk about another quarterback who just played in the Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes. How did this game affect his legacy? We'll talk about that when we come back. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about how this Super Bowl loss affects Patrick Mahomes' legacy. And I think it depends on how you look at it. Because when you look at Patrick Mahomes and his career, his body of work, I don't think it impacts him that much because of what he's done in just a short amount of time. 3 Super Bowls. I mean, he's been to the AFC Championship game every single year that he's been a starter. He's an all-time great. He's first ballot Hall of Famer. I think where this really impacts him is in the greatest of all time debate. Because you've heard it all over the place, I'm sure. Leading up to this game, and really over the past couple of years now, it's really been Mahomes and Brady. And just, can Mahomes catch up to Brady? And when we got to this point now here, if Mahomes was able to pull it off and win and do a three-peat, would he surpass Brady? Some people were already talking about that. I said, and you can go back and watch the previous shows, I said it would only just narrow the gap. I would not be able to put him over Brady because, again, Brady did it for so long, and Patrick Mahomes still has some ways to go, even with the three-peat. But for me, and this could be an overreaction, but I think this kind of just took him out of the greatest of all time debate. Because Patrick Mahomes now, with that loss, is now 3-2 in Super Bowls. And Tom Brady, at one point in his career, was 3-2 in Super Bowls, because you got to remember, he went 10 years without winning a ring. However, in all of Tom Brady's Super Bowl losses, Tom Brady never got embarrassed like that. Like what we saw on Sunday. Now, it's not just one individual. It's a team sport. I get it. But Tom Brady would not be losing 34-0 in a Super Bowl in the second half. Now, obviously 28-3 happened, but here's the thing. Tom Brady was able to come back from that. And he had some help, of course. The Patriots defense really stepped up in that Super Bowl. They shut down the Falcons offense. Also, you could blame Kyle Shanahan for some of the play calling, because Matt Ryan took some sacks that he shouldn't have taken, because the Falcons could have got some points. I mean, you remember, Julio Jones makes that awesome catch down the sidelines, and you thought, okay, the Falcons are going to get some points here, and they're going to shut the door in New England. And they didn't do that. But Tom Brady was able to... Everybody's going to focus on Tom Brady, of course. And yeah, Tom Brady was a driving force in that comeback. And they were able to pull it off. The greatest comeback in Super Bowl history. 25-point deficit, and they won. But you look at his Super Bowl losses, though. 3 Super Bowl losses. 2 of them were to the Giants. Now, the Giants' pass rush gave him problems in both games. But he had an opportunity in those games to come back and either tie the game or win the game. Now, there wasn't that much time left on the clock, especially in the second Super Bowl, because he had, what did he have, like 57 seconds left? But he did get a Hail Mary up. He got a Hail Mary up in all 3 of his Super Bowl losses. And he ended up losing those 2 games. And then you look at the Eagles Super Bowl that he lost. Got a Hail Mary up at the end. But they lost the game. But he threw for 500 yards in that game. 500! The most passing yards in any playoff game ever. 500 yards. he never really embarrassed himself in the Super Bowl. His team never really got embarrassed. Well, I guess, losing to the Giants when you're on the precipice of a perfect season, okay, but, the Giants are 9-7. But it's just, Tom Brady never got demolished in a game like that in the Super Bowl. Now, I went back and looked at some of his playoff losses. There were some games where he lost by a couple of scores. The Ravens championship game in the 2012 during the 2012 season. There was also the game against the Broncos. This was before Peyton Manning. He lost by a couple of scores. That was his first playoff loss ever. Champ Bailey, the pick six. And then I think the most embarrassing loss came in the wild card game. That was in, I think it was the 2009 season, the 2009-2010 season. They lost 33-14 to the Ravens, and I vaguely remember that game, like watching it, because I do remember. I'm pretty sure I had it on in my basement when I was watching it. Ray Rice had a long touchdown run in that game, but again, that's before the Super Bowl. I was surprised by what we saw on Sunday. I really was. I thought these teams coming in were evenly matched. Yes, the Eagles, you could look at them and say they had better talent, but I just thought the Chiefs, with their experience, this game was going to be a close game, and it was going to come down to maybe who had the ball last, and it was not that kind of game. It was not that kind of game. The Eagles, from start to finish, they dominated this game. And I know that the Chiefs put up 22 points, but that's not really what the final score was. And it was funny because I saw on TikTok somebody posted, everybody is talking about this being his worst performance. It really was not his worst performance. The Tampa performance was worse. And he's showing, the highlights from, this individual is showing the highlights from the second half when he's down 34-0. You go on the NFL's YouTube account, and they pull up, and there's a Patrick Mahomes Super Bowl highlight video, right? You know when the highlights start? When it's 34-0. That's when the highlights start. Because, he hit Worthy on those two passes. One of them was for the touchdown, and then at the end of the game, and, the Chiefs, they were at midfield because Kenny Pickett and the offense, they went for it on 4th and 5, 4th and 6, whatever it was. They didn't get it. And then first play, Mahomes throws that pass down the field to Worthy for the touchdown, which was a great play. But you could also say garbage time, and the Eagles' backups were in. Anthony in the chat says, what are your thoughts on Aaron going to Miami? Do you think he'd be willing to be a backup or no? He still thinks he could be a starter. No, I think he's going to want to be a starter. And it's like I said before, an injury, maybe he waits for an injury to happen and then, maybe the team decides to pick him up. But I don't think he's willing to be a backup. But anyways, back to what I was saying here. Yeah, it's just, that was the worst game I ever saw Mahomes play. And I went back and watched the highlights last night. I mean, he almost threw a pick on the first drive of the game, where he's rolling around, where he's running around, and then, he throws it towards the sideline, and it almost got picked off. He could have had 3 interceptions in this game. He could have had 4 turnovers. And then the next 2 picks, look, it was 10-0. If Mahomes doesn't throw those 2 interceptions, maybe the Eagles get, another touchdown or a field goal or something. Maybe it's like 17-0 instead, or it's 13-0. All right, you're still in the game. But those 2 turnovers, the Eagles immediately cashed in. They turned that into 14 points. And all of a sudden, you're down 24-0. Now, the Chiefs have come back from a 24-0 deficit before. But they did it in a quarter. It was the Texans game from Mahomes' first Super Bowl run. But now this is in the Super Bowl. And, I'm sitting there going, all right, well, if Mahomes is going to want to show that, he's up there with Brady, you got to try to come back from this. But I just, at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, they're done. After the Cooper DeJean pick 6 to make it 17-0, I'm sitting there going, I don't think they're coming back from this. And just the way the offense was moving and just, Kelsey didn't look right. I mean, you watch Travis Kelsey, and people have commented on this. He catches the ball, and it's not like he tries to, juke out a man or truck somebody. He's not doing that. He's just catching the ball, and then he just falls down. He just gets tackled. He's not the same player that he was. And I don't know what happened with DeAndre Hopkins on that drop on 3rd and 11. I'm not saying that would change the game, but at least the Chiefs maybe would have got some points to go into the half. DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, he catches that. He usually catches that ball, and he just dropped it. But it was just, that's why I go back to saying, not only did the better team win, the more prepared team won. I don't know what the Chiefs are doing, but yeah, it's just, for me, I really think this Super Bowl performance just slammed the door on Mahomes being considered the greatest of all time. And even if this didn't happen, and if they lost a competitive Super Bowl, it'd be different. But the fact that he is 3-2 in Super Bowls now, and two of them, and then the 2 losses are blowout losses, that is always going to be held against him. Because Tom Brady never got blown out in the Super Bowl. And I look at the Tampa Super Bowl differently, because I don't think Mahomes gave away the game. I think he gave away the game in this Super Bowl here. Because the Chiefs were able to move the ball against Tampa. It's just they could not score. They would get down near the end zone, and they couldn't score. And there were drops early on in that Super Bowl too. And I thought the Chiefs' defense kept them in the game here on Sunday. It's just then once the turnovers started happening, then they released they released the hounds, as Mr. Burns from The Simpsons would say. It's just, I look at Mahomes differently after the Super Bowl. I really do. I can't look at him the same way after this. And that doesn't mean that the Chiefs are going to bounce back from this. All right, I know this sounds like this is doom and gloom for Mahomes, but they're going to bounce back from this. Mahomes is going to win. I would say he would win at least one. He's going to win at least one more ring. I don't want to say. I would lean towards saying 2. But I know he's going to win one more. But I think in terms of just the overall greatest of all time conversation, I don't think it's ever going to happen. If he wins 8 Super Bowls, I mean, yeah, you can come back to this and we can come back to this discussion. But I don't know. For me, I think it's going to be Brady until somebody else comes along, and but it's hard. It's hard. And Tom Brady played for so long. This is not normal, what he was able to do. And again, he had some help. It's not, Tom Brady didn't do it all by himself. You could go back to all of his Super Bowls and you could point out other things that went his way and say that's the reason why they won. Like, look at the beginning of the second dynasty. The Patriots were on the verge of losing, and then Russell Wilson throws the pick. But you could also say, well, Tom Brady overcame a 10-point deficit in that. And then look at the Falcons. The Falcons had a complete meltdown. It's... But you know what? Tom Brady could have just laid down and said, yep, the game's over. But he didn't. They kept playing. I felt like on Sunday the Chiefs did give up. When they panned to that sideline and you just saw all the looks on the players' faces, they just looked like they were done. Like, we have no chance of coming back. So, I don't know. I could talk about this for hours, but we got to go to our next break. Actually, before we do that, just want to remind you guys, again, tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining. Between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers, we appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about Russell Wilson now. And it looks like him and the Steelers will be parting ways. So we'll talk about that. I'll give you my thoughts on it when we return. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to now talk about Russell Wilson and the Steelers parting ways, where he could possibly end up in 2025. So, you know, you heard Russ talking about the Steelers, you know, during the Pro Bowl and, you know, even around that, not even just with the Pro Bowl itself, but even, you know, because I know he made an appearance on the Pat McAfee show as well, but you know, and they asked him about a possible reunion with Pete Carroll, and if that worked, I know we talked about it as well, and how that relationship would fare. But, you know, he kept saying, you know, I'm focused on the Steelers. He talked about wanting to be back with the Steelers. He liked, you know, being there. And then all of a sudden you hear, oh, yeah, he's not coming back. What happened? And, you know, I know we covered when Art Rooney II spoke and said that, you know, preferably they would want to either bring back one of Justin Fields or Russ. And right now, it seems like it's either going to be Justin Fields or it's going to be a completely different option. And I know we talked about Aaron Rodgers to start off the show. He could be a possible option. But we don't know right now. Now, the other thing that came out was the fact that Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Steelers, and Russ, they didn't have the best working relationship, that there were some issues there. Steelers insider Mark Caboli reported this. And this is what he said. This is an article on Sports Illustrated that I have up here. So he said, still, despite Wilson and Smith spending countless hours together after the typical workday watching film and publicly joking about it, a team source recently said that Wilson and Smith did not have a very good working relationship, but fought through their differences as best as they could. Now, Mike Tomlin, he disputed these claims. He said that they have a good working relationship. He said, I thought it was pretty good and fluid. I know they do an awesome job of spending time together and communicating formally and informally. We're not paid by the hour in this business, and I think their willingness to work is kind of a reflection of that sentiment. Now, supposedly, Arthur Smith wouldn't let Russell Wilson audible out of plays, and that was, you know, kind of why this came up. I mean, I guess we'll never really know, but there's definitely some truth to it. I could see that. I could definitely see that. So maybe, and now Russ is gone. So I don't know, but was this the right move for the Steelers? You know, it's tough to say. It's tough to say. It's kind of similar to how I feel with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. But you know what? Here's the thing. Different circumstances with those two situations. Because when you look at the Steelers, again, I've said it. I thought Russ looked good with the Steelers. Now, was he Russ from Seattle? No. And, you know, Russ had some nice throws in certain games. And I said, all right, you know, that was maybe vintage Russ right there. I mean, not like he, you know, improvised and threw, but, you know, he's still got a good arm. And I do think that he could still be a starter in this league. But the Steelers did lose 5 straight to end the season, and he was the quarterback. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it's just him, right? Because football is the ultimate team sport. You could look at the play calling, the personnel. It wasn't just him. We talked about how the offensive line is not great earlier when discussing where Aaron Rodgers can end up. So you can't just say it's all Russ's fault. But yeah, Russ was not great to finish off the year. I think overall, yeah, I mean, I thought he was good. But Steeler fans are tired of hearing that. They need to figure something out for next year. And if they go the route and bring in Aaron Rodgers, yeah, you can look at that as, well, they're doing the same thing. They're bringing in a veteran. But yeah, I guess, I mean, for me, then bring back Justin Fields. You know, see what Justin Fields has. I mean, he was playing good before you went to Russ. At times, I was like, he's not looking good. You know, the Cowboys game sticks out to me when talking about Fields. But then again, I mean, the game started late. You know, there was a delay with that, right? There was a lightning delay. But you can get more out of Justin Fields because right now he's at the point in his career where, you know, he's still got his legs. He's an elite runner. And, you know, even throwing the football wasn't that bad with the Steelers. You know, he had the Steelers in a good spot. And then they handed it off to Russ. And, you know, things were looking good. And then all of a sudden, you know, they got their winning season and then they tanked after that. So who knows how the season would have went if Justin Fields started the whole year. I mean, I think it probably would have ended the same. They probably still would have made the playoffs and lost to whoever in the first round. But I don't know. I think they should give Justin Fields a shot. Why not? He's 25. Like I said, he's an elite runner still. Give him a chance for a whole year and see what he could do. And then if not, then they got to figure something out. Now, back to Russ. Where does he end up? Well, the Giants are a possibility. I know that. The Giants were maybe looking to acquire him last year. Because I think he did visit the Giants. But then he decided to go to Pittsburgh. So maybe the Giants revisit that. I know my Giant fan friends are not thrilled about that. I mean, look, listen, if the Giants have a chance to get Matthew Stafford, I'd want Stafford over Russ. But if they get Russ, it is what it is. You know. Could the Pete Carroll reunion happen? You know, I mean, Pete Carroll said they're going to take a look at every option, basically. I think Russ will find his way on another team. And like I said, I think he could still be a starter. It's just, I think he's more of just, hey, let's bring you in, and we have, you know, a young guy to sit behind you so they can learn from you. I don't think he's going to come in and be a multi-year guy and lead you to the promised land. That window is closed for Russ. And I don't know, maybe he ends up on a team that's stacked. Like, maybe, what if he went to the Vikings? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. But I just don't think he has it anymore to be the guy that can uplift your team and get you to the promised land. It's just not there. And I've said that over and over again. And I think especially when you saw how the Steelers ended off the year, yeah, it's just that's who Russ is. And it's not all his fault. it's more than just him, but I just don't see it. And it's amazing how, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, to a lesser extent Kirk Cousins, in a way. Well, because I think, you would take peak Russ and peak Aaron Rodgers over peak Kirk Cousins. That's why I said that. But Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and Kirk Cousins, they all could be playing for new teams in 2025. It's amazing. And there's teams out there that need quarterbacks. So, where are they all going to end up? I mean, we talked about where Rodgers could go. I mean, Cleveland? I don't know. I can't see Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers playing in Cleveland. Now, Kirk Cousins, his name was thrown out there just because Kevin Stefanski worked with him when they were in Minnesota together. So that's a possibility. But, yeah, I can't see them going to Cleveland. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, could the Steelers end up with one of these three guys? I mean, either that or Justin Fields. So you got the three guys I just mentioned in Justin Fields. They're out there. We'll have to wait and see. It's going to be interesting where he ends up. I mean, maybe he does go to the Giants. Now, the Giants did something interesting. They hired Matthew Stafford's brother-in-law, I think, to be just I forget off the top of my head what the position was, but just to be on the coaching staff. So now that's got everybody up in a frenzy, like, oh, could Matthew Stafford go to the Giants? Now, I would love to get Stafford. I said that. But they'd have to trade for him. Russ, you could just bring him in, you sign him for cheap, and, you go from there. I don't know. Well, we'll see what happens, but let me know what you guys think. Where does Russ potentially end up? There's teams out there. And I think he will be a starter somewhere next year. We just got to see where. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. So we are going to take our next break. And then when we come back, we will talk about Kellen Moore taking the Saints job. If he's the right man for the job, how do we feel about this? We'll discuss all of that when we come back from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we are going to now get into talking about Kellen Moore and him essentially taking the Saints job. And how do we feel about that? So, leading up to the Super Bowl, it seemed like that's where things were trending towards, is Kellen Moore taking this job. The Saints were the last team that had a vacancy when it comes to the head coach position, and they decided we're going to go with Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore wanted the Saints job. So, and I'm having issues with my camera again. Sorry, folks. But how do we feel about this? Look, it's a first-time head coach, and, when it comes to the Saints, Saints are kind of a mess right now. And it's amazing how so many candidates, took themselves out of the running. Cliff Kingsbury, I think, interviewed for the job. He took himself out to stay with Washington. Joe Brady with the Bills, he took himself out. Mike McCarthy even. And that just goes to show you how unattractive the Saints' job is. Because when you look at their cap situation and the team has just not been good in recent years. Now, in 2023, they finished 9-8. They tied with the Bucs, but the Bucs had the tiebreaker over them, so they won the division. And they got off to a good start this year, or last year. I don't know. See, again, I've been doing this for weeks now where I'm like, this year, last year, whatever. They got off to a good start in 2024. They put up 40 points back-to-back weeks, and you thought, okay, maybe this is... I know the first week was against the Panthers, but then, we were like, wow, they beat the Cowboys, and they put up 40 against them, but then the Cowboys turned out not to be a very good team this year. But you thought maybe the Saints are turning things around here. And then they played against the Eagles, who just won the Super Bowl in New Orleans the other night. And then things kind of fell apart after that. Injuries were a problem too. I get it. Rashid Shaheed got hurt. Chris Olave got hurt. Derek Carr got hurt. So maybe they probably would have finished with a better record had everybody played the whole year. But, yeah, the Saints, for me, they need to go into a rebuild. And the other thing, too, is Kellen Moore going to get more than just 1 or 2 years? Are they going to give him time to put together his staff, to put together to rebuild this team in his image, and go from there? Because we've seen head coaches be let go after 1 year, and maybe someone becomes available that wants to take the job and they feel is better qualified than Kellen Moore, and they let Kellen Moore go. Now, to be honest, if I was Kellen Moore, Nick Sirianni is saying, let's run it back, Kellen, basically, when they won the Super Bowl, when they got handed the Lombardi, when Terry Bradshaw was interviewing all of them. If I'm Kellen Moore, yeah, why would I want to leave Philly? How about you wait and see if there's a better option out there next year, and then you go for that job? But then again, you could also look at it from a financial standpoint. You're a head coach. You're getting paid more money as opposed to being an offensive coordinator. So maybe that played a role. And we talked about this in our production meeting too. And the idea was brought up, well, if you're Kellen Moore, you ask for, what if you ask for that John Gruden contract to guarantee, like, hey, give me time to turn this thing around? But I didn't necessarily agree with that because John Gruden was an experienced head coach. Now, he was out of the game for a long time. Hadn't coached in a long time. But he has head coaching experience. Kellen Moore does not have head coaching experience. If I'm a GM, if I'm an owner of the Saints, I'm not looking to give Kellen Moore, who has never been a head coach, that big of a contract. And especially when, we talked about the Saints and, their financial issues. And obviously we're talking about, salary cap with the players, but, now it's like, we're going to pay for, we're going to give our head coach, who's never been a head coach before, this long contract. But, because it goes back to what I said before. Is Kellen Moore going to be around them more than just 1 year? I mean, I think if Kellen Moore is the coach for, 3 to 4 years and you don't see any improvement, well, yeah, then you have the right to move off of him. But if you give him only 1 year, it's not right. Because the Saints, it's going to take more than just 1 year to turn this thing around. Are they going to keep Derek Carr? Are they going to keep some of these veteran guys? They already started to sell off. I mean, they traded Marshawn Lattimore to the Commanders. I think you trade some of these veteran players that you still have on your team and get stuff back for them, because you're not going to be competitive. You're just not. You look at this division that they're in. You got 2 young quarterbacks. You got another veteran quarterback in Tampa, and Baker Mayfield. Looks like he's found a home there. Michael Penix, I liked what I saw. Bryce Young, I really liked what I saw after he got reinserted into the starting lineup. The Saints, you got Derek Carr, but Derek Carr really hasn't given you much. And what is this, his 3rd year? Already? Actually, no, this is his... this was his... Or this is going to be his 3rd year. Yeah, this is going to be his 3rd year with the Saints coming up. I know, because I was like, I'm thinking 2022. I'm like, no, that was his last year, because I was with Devontae Adams and Josh McDaniels. No, this would be his 3rd year coming up with the Saints. Yeah, it's just, and Derek Carr, it doesn't seem like things are working out there. So it's a tough job. It's going to be tough. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with this roster. I think when I was looking at the salary cap, what are they? They're like $51 million over the cap. And every year people are saying, how are they able to do this? How are they able to do this? I mean, they figure it out. And you got some guys that you're still paying that aren't on the team right now. I'm trying to look it up. So this is the salary cap for 2025 for the Saints. So they are, give you the exact number right here on spottrack.com. That's usually where I go. And of course it says Safari can't open up the page. Nice. But I think it was like $51 million over the cap. Either 41 or 51. And it's just, how are they able to do this every single year? But yeah, if I'm the Saints, I'm looking to just let go of guys and just you really got to start over again. Because since Drew Brees left, since Drew Brees retired, since Sean Payton left, it's gone downhill. It's gone downhill. Yes, they finished with the winning record in 2023, but look what happened this year. I give Kellen more credit for taking the job, because listen, if he's able to turn the Saints around and help, contribute to that, he's going to look at as a hero, and Saint fans, they want to see this team be competitive again. Because there were years during Drew Brees' career where, the Saints, they weren't winning divisions, they weren't making the playoffs. I mean, Drew Brees was still putting together good seasons. It's just the defense was not good. And then finally when they, fixed the defense, they made the playoffs from 2017 to 2020. And then Brees retired, and they haven't made the playoffs since. And then they thought bringing in Derek Carr was going to help them out, and really hasn't. So, yeah, it's tough right now for the Saints. It's tough. This team needs a lot of work. They could be one of the worst teams in the league next year. Again, they didn't finish with a good record this year. So, I mean, we'll see what they do in the offseason. I think they should continue to sell off players, get stuff back for them, and just start over. Start over. But we'll have to wait and see on that. But what do you guys think about Kellen Moore taking the Saints job? I mean, for him, I hope that it works out and he's not gone after 1 year. You need more than 1 year. Because like I said, we have seen teams just move off of head coaches after 1 year and don't even give them a chance to really fix this thing. But we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. So we are going to take our final break of the show now. And then when we come back, we'll talk about Deebo Samuel. He requested a trade from the Niners. The Niners have granted permission for him to seek a trade. So we're going to talk about that, where maybe he could potentially end up, what this means for the 49ers going forward, things like that. Kind of just talk about Deebo Samuel's season as a whole as well. But yeah, just another interesting development leading up to the Super Bowl. There's a lot of news that came out. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, Russell Wilson and the Steelers. I mean, that was kind of a little bit before the Super Bowl. And then we also had this as well. So, we're in the off season now. So this is this kind of stuff that we're going to talk about. I just hope that it's not going to be like Brandon Ayuk, where we were talking about that like almost every week, and there was no movement until finally something happened when they gave him a new contract. So that's what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about Deebo Samuel requesting a trade from the Niners when we come back from our final break of the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to talk about Deebo Samuel, the 49ers, requesting a trade, and it looks like he's going to be playing elsewhere in 2025. So, Deebo Samuel did not have a great year. He didn't. He was kind of a shell of himself. And, it's surprising, because, he is a good player, and just to see him going through these struggles, it was odd. But then again, you look at the 49ers, and it's just a lot of players struggled. A lot of guys also struggled to stay on the field. Also, I was reminded as I was going through social media, the Devondre Campbell situation, the Niners suspended him. It was a forgettable year for the 49ers. But when it comes to Deebo Samuel, he also had those instances where he posted on social media and talked about how he wasn't getting the ball. And then you could see, against the Rams, in that bad weather game on that Thursday night, they were trying to get him the ball, and, it just wasn't working out. He had that drop in that game. Against the Dolphins, he had one of his best games of the season. I think that was the following week. But he just wasn't the same. Now, I don't think he's washed, because, he was also running back kick returns, and he still has that game-breaking speed. It's just when he would get the ball on offense, it's just he wasn't really getting anything going. And then, like I said, his drops were a problem too. Like I said, the potential touchdown against the Rams he dropped. I mean, that was a walk-in touchdown. There was balls that went through his hands against the Packers. It was a mess. It was a mess of a season for not just him, but for the Niners. And now you kind of look at the 49ers and their situation, and, they got some things to decide. We could be seeing, Kyle Juszczyk getting cut this offseason. You got players getting older. George Kittle's getting up there in age. And you also have these, receivers, this receiver room. Brandon Ayuk's coming back next year. You got Ricky Pearsall going into his sophomore season, and Jawan Jennings as well. I mean, odds are Deebo Samuel is expendable. They could definitely move off of him. He could be the odd man out. And on top of that, Christian McCaffrey, the Niners are hoping they get him back healthy. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really have a problem with this. I think the 49ers, they can move off of Deebo and, they'll be okay next year if everybody's healthy. If the defense is healthy too, getting guys back to 100% like Nick Bosa, because I know he was banged up. He was dealing with that hip injury. It was, I keep saying it was a rough year for the Niners. I think Deebo could go elsewhere and be successful. I still believe he's got good football left. Like I said, the drops were an issue, but I still think he's got, the game-breaking speed that we've seen over the course of his career still. But where would he go? The Commanders come to mind. I feel like with that offense, they could, move him around. And, I mean, he's a guy that's, he's not that deep ball receiver. He's not that contested catch receiver. But, he's someone that, could be a slot guy. I feel like, and you got Terry McLaurin there, who's the deep ball guy. So, I feel like that could work. I'm trying to see what other destinations. The Patriots, that I saw that could be a possible option. Look, the Patriots got a ton of cap space. And they need to continue to surround Drake May with as much talent as possible. And I think the Patriots are in for a big offseason. You got the head coach. I like the Josh McDaniels move. Now it's all about surrounding your young quarterback with talent. And I think, Deebo Samuel maybe could work there for Drake May. I'm trying to see who else, because I know I had an article that, there were teams that were listed. I think the Steelers were also a possible destination. The Steelers need help at that position. So it's possible they go that route. But we'll see. The other thing too is, Brandon Ayuk is coming back from an ACL and MCL injury. So, he's not going to be 100% to start off the year. So you trade Deebo and Jawan Jennings. Remember the game against the Rams early on in the season? The games Jawan Jennings had? Didn't he have 3 touchdowns in the game? So you got him. You got Ricky Pearsall. You got George Kittle. If McCaffrey's healthy, they could probably get by until Brandon Ayuk, gets his legs back underneath him. Or maybe you keep Deebo around for that reason. I don't know. We'll see. But Deebo back in 2021 had a solid year. 77 receptions, 1,400 yards, 6 touchdowns. But then he also had 8 more touchdowns, and these were rushing touchdowns. That was when he was kind of like a hybrid player. They were using him out of the backfield and, as a receiver. That was his best. And he got a first-team All-Pro that season, too. And he became just the 3rd player in NFL history to have 1,000 receiving yards with at least 5 touchdowns rushing and 5 more receiving. And then so this is overall. He has 334 receptions for 4,792 yards and 22 touchdowns, along with 202 carries for 1,143 rushing yards and 20 touchdowns in his career. Those 20 rushing scores are the most by a wide receiver since at least 1960. This is courtesy of ESPN.com. But this is during the 4-game stretch against the Seahawks, the Packers, the Bills, and the Bears. So he had just 97 yards from scrimmage on 17 touches. He finished with 21 yards, 20 yards, and 35 yards in those games. It was the first time Samuel failed to have at least 50 yards from scrimmage in 4 straight games since a 5-game stretch in his rookie season in 2019. And, I talked about the social media post. He deleted this, but this was on December 9th. He said, not struggling at all, just not getting the ball. But he was struggling because, balls were going through his hands. He was dropping passes. It just was not good. It's not good. He was struggling. But I do agree with him too. I do agree with him, though. He also wasn't getting the ball, but when he would get the ball, he just wouldn't do anything with it. But looking at his stats, though, from this season, he had 806 scrimmage yards and 4 touchdowns. Both career lows, but you could look at the 2020 season, but he only played 7 games. He was injured that season. And, they signed him to a 3-year extension, in August of 2022. But, yeah, they could be looking to move off of him. But, yeah, disappointing year for him. I think he can bounce back from it. I feel like I'm always Mr. Positive when it comes to a lot of these guys. But, I do think maybe a change of scenery is best for him. Because, again, the 49ers got these other players on the team. And, I feel like... And on top of that, too, they got to worry about paying Brock Purdy. They're going to have to pay him. I think they will pay him. We had this conversation again yesterday. I know they're going to have to pay him, but there's got to be a way that they can work on a team-friendly deal. Is Brock Purdy really going to price himself at $50 to $60 million a year? Now, I think if he goes out in 2025 and he has this unbelievable season and the 49ers, get to the Super Bowl again, then, maybe we have a different conversation. But I am not looking to pay Brock Purdy $50 to $60 million a year. I'm just not. He's not worth that kind of money. And I like Brock Purdy a lot. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he receives a ton of heat, which is unwarranted, but I understand it. He's not a $50, $60 million quarterback. He's not. So that's another reason why they can move off him. And that's why I brought up, them possibly, cutting Kyle Juszczyk because, they need to, save some money because, they're going to have to do something with Purdy at some point. It's going to be interesting. I just hope it's not something that drags like the Brandon Ayuk stuff, like I said, because, if you guys watch those shows from last year, it was like I talked about Brandon Ayuk so much, and I was getting sick and tired of it. But this is a different situation now, because now Deebo Samuel is just looking to get traded, as opposed to looking for a new contract. But we'll see what happens. And I don't think the 49ers want to move off of Deebo. They want to keep this band together, because I think a healthy 49ers squad next year, they are going to be back in the postseason. I don't think the window is closed on them yet. They still got a lot of great players on this team. They're going to need to, I think make smart decisions this offseason with, whether it's free agency or the draft. But I do think if this team is healthy next year, they're going to be the team that we saw similar to what made the Super Bowl a couple years ago now, you could say, or last year. So... we'll have to wait and see. But Deebo Samuel, it is likely that he might not be a 49er, which is going to be weird, but it happens. But let me know what you guys think. Where could Deebo possibly end up? Let me know in the comments. And with that, that is pretty much it for the show for today. A lot of stuff to cover. We talked about Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, where they could end up, and Kellen Moore taking the Saints job. The Mahomes legacy conversation is going to be a conversation that's going to be had a lot. Because that did not sit right with me. I really don't look at him the same way again. I don't. I really don't. I not in terms of him being an all-time great, but just when we talk about the greatest of all time, I don't look at him the same way. I think he's going to be looked at as one of the greatest, but like I said earlier in the show, it could be an overreaction, but I don't know. It's hard to come back from 2 blowout losses in the Super Bowl. That's on the grand stage. Everybody's watching. This isn't like a 1 p.m. game on Fox and only a select group of people are watching. This was on the national stage. This was on the Super Bowl, the biggest game of the year, and they didn't score until the end of the third quarter. And at that point, it was 34-0. So, and there's more conversations to be had with this game, and we'll talk more about. We'll talk about some stuff tomorrow. We'll talk about the Eagles' defense and how it stacks up amongst the greatest performances of all time in the Super Bowl. I want to have that conversation. There's still a lot to be had with that game. And, it needs to be because we're in the offseason now, too. And then also, like we just talked about, Deebo, where he could end up. So we're in the offseason now. So now it's just got to get creative. And, we're going to get to free agency. There'll be a ton of stuff to cover. Like I said, we're going to talk about a lot of things. Biggest disappointments from the year, teams that were really disappointing, overviews on the seasons, and also take a look at my predictions to start the year and how they turned out, because they really didn't turn out. I had the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, and that didn't happen. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and as always, I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet.